Hi everyone, this is Ray Mendoza, and today we are doing the third session of my Storytelling 101, and we are going to talk about how to write the body of your story. So on the first lesson, we have covered the basics of storytelling. We have talked about the introduction. So let me just go back to the introduction. You need to have that first liner. I hope you already have that as we start this lesson, and that you have already thought about what kind of story you're going to write. Before we start, I just need to share, I just came back from having a conference call with a book club, and what's so interesting is they invited me to talk about my book, and then they of course asked questions about the book. And so when we were talking about the book, what's so interesting was the readers were talking about my characters as if they're real people with real emotions, real problems, and real opinion. It's like they exist. It's so fulfilling to hear other people talk about the story that you've created in your head, that you wrote. You've given your characters life, and you've shared those characters to other people so that other people will be inspired by their individual stories. It's really awesome. And I cannot describe the feeling. It's very strange. So I just wanted to share that because I thought, I would help you be more driven to go through this project that we're doing. You writing a story, even though it's just 500 words, what we call microfiction, it's still a good start because that's how you hone your skills. Writing longer stories that have more characters, more plots, and you have more room to express your thoughts and be able to share more lessons and convey your message better. So I just wanted to share that before we start. So I have my notes here, and I guess we're gonna start writing the story. Let's do that. Okay, so now that you have your hook, which is your introduction, your first liner, we're going to write the second paragraph or the second part of that story. So you have your first liner on top, and then you're going to follow that up with your supporting paragraph. So the first thing that I want to cover is how would you write your story? There are different ways to write a story. You can write in the first person. Your story will be told by your character, using his or her own thoughts. In my book, my main character, which is Janelle, she's the narrator of the story. Other characters that are in the story are being evaluated based on her perspective. The key to using the first person, in my experience, is you have to invest a lot of emotions. You have to really know your character, how that character thinks and feels and reacts to everything that's going on around him or her, and you should be able to describe that in your story. You have to invest on feelings because your audience should be able to relate to that character telling the story. The other option is you can write in the second person, and some people have done this, but I personally feel that the second person is so much better used when you're writing nonfiction, because I think when you're teaching somebody a skill, or you're describing a process, you can talk to the audience directly, which is what I'm doing now. I'm talking to you as we do this tutorial, but I find it hard, just me, to write a story with my audience being in the mix, because I feel it's not effective, and I cannot tell a story with having to talk to a person reading my story, and them validating my story. It's just hard for me, but it's an option. And they say when you're writing the second person, you have to use the present tense. Always be talking about what's going on as it happens. Because I think it's very hard to talk to an audience when you're referring to something that has already happened. It's just difficult. And since you're starting, we would like to work on this story as easily and as conveniently as possible, just for now that you're starting. We can be more complicated later on when we're more familiar with our styles and how we write the story. I guess the most popular, and a lot of writers are using this type of writing the story. You can write it in the third person, telling the story like an observer, like a spectator, where you're telling the story of different kinds of people and events, but you're not part of the story. So what are the benefits of writing your story in the third person? Well, number one, it's easier because you're not part of the story, you're a spectator, you're telling the story as it happens and describing it to people, and you don't have a bias because you're being fair to every character. You're telling the story the way each character wants you to tell the story, if I make sense, based on what the character actually feels and thinks. My book is told in the first person based on the perspective of my lead character, which is Janelle. And it's fun because I get to be in her mind, and I can make comments about what I think, for example, my other character, James, is thinking, but I'm not really sure if that's what he's thinking. I'm just basing it on the perspective of my lead character. So it's fun. So those are the 3 ways that you can write your story. You have to invest in emotion. Is your story sad? Is your story funny? Is your story scary? You have to already set that emotion as soon as you write the second paragraph. Because remember, we're writing a 500-word story or even less, and you already have to go straight to your, I would call it the action. Take your audience immediately to the heart of your story, the conflict, because you don't have enough room to move around. You're kind of limited with the words. So go right straight into your conflict and discuss that. Tell the story with the conflict in front of your audience, so they know what they're dealing with and they know what to expect. There are ways to begin your story. Every story does not have to start from the beginning. Your middle can be your beginning, your ending in the middle, and then your character may want to reflect on what has transpired and go back to the beginning, which is how it happened, and that can be your ending. Since we're doing a very short story, we're going to use one character and you can bring in another character into the meat of your story. However, you want your audience to get to know that character, and in what sequence. Is that supporting character in front with your main character, or with that character come out at the very end when the conflict has already been resolved? It's up to you. So I want you to think of who your character is, your main character. Is he an angry person, a bubbly person? What is his profession? Is he even educated, or is he a person from the streets? Is he poor? Is he rich? What are his fears? What brings him or her joy? Those things. I need you to think about that, because once you've decided how to narrate your story, you already know what kind of words you're going to use and what kind of emotion you're going to invest into that character for your audience to be able to relate. Your character does not have to be traditional. Just any character is a good character, as long as you'll be able to expound and make that character pop, make that character shine. There's really no limit, and it doesn't even have to be a person. It can be an animal who talks, or it can be anything. It can be a rock, it can be a shirt, it can be your AirPod, anything. It's sky's the limit. But I just need you to make sure that you know what kind of emotion you're going to incorporate into this person's style of narrating the story. It's when I first wrote my very, very first story. I wrote a story about a man who lost his wife to cancer. It was a third person narration. And what happened to that story was I imagined myself as that person. When I wrote that story, I didn't know how to write a conversation or dialogues. So that story there was no conversation. It was just the man dealing with that emotion. So don't be stressed about having a conversation or dialogues in your story, because you don't have to for now, because you're just starting. So okay guys, I want to thank you for joining me in this third lesson. Okay guys, so we've successfully covered the third lesson, which is writing the meat of your story. If I didn't cover anything that you wanted me to talk about, or if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me an email, or you can subscribe to my channel. I would like to thank you for still watching, and I will have my last 2 tutorials coming, and I hope you'll still be there. See you guys. Bye.